Sechas Nedarim Daf Nun Hey begins with a Mishnah and contains one additional Mishnah near the end of the Daf. Primary topic of the Daf is the terms Dagon and Tavua and what they include in Hilchas Nedarim. The Gemara will explain them. We'll have a Machokas in the Mishnah. The Gemara will explain it. We'll have another word and what it means, and we'll get into some Agadata along the way. So let's begin. By way of introduction, there are two potential words for grain, which may include other types of produce as well. We have Dagon and Tavua. Now the word Dagon is from the word midgin, which means to pile up, and that generally that refers to anything which is harvested and heaped in mounds. So that would usually refer to grain. Now, tavua is a term for grain as well, or could potentially be more specific or even less specific than the Dagon. Now we have four levels of specificity here. The most specific, the most narrow way of defining it would be that it only refers to the five types of grain, and those would be chitas, or kusmin, shifon, and shibolet. Shuol, wheat, barley, spelt, rye, and oat. Now, a level past that would be to include other grains as well. We could think of grains which we might include. The Gemara discusses pul hamitzri yavesh, dried Egyptian beans. That's something that's also harvested and heaped up in piles, and it resembles grain. A little bit further than that would be other things which are also produce but are not grain. So that would be vegetables and fruits. A little bit further than that may even include all other types of income, which the Gemara says is most definitely not included in those words, but it could be included in a different word, which we'll ask about. So what is the halacha? So as far as tavua, the Mishnah says that Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim both agree that tavua refers only to the five types of grain. Now, the question is, what does dagon mean? So Rabbi Meir says it is more broad than the five types of grain. It also includes pol hamitzri yavesh, also includes the dried Egyptian bean, because it is also heaped. And he understands that the term dagon is related to the word midgin, which means heaped up. Now the Chachamim disagree, and they say no, dagon also only refers to the five types of grain. It doesn't refer to anything more than that. Now, what is excluded from grain according to Rabbi Meir? What's excluded is the third level, and that is vegetables and fruits. Those are not called grain. Those aren't heaped. Those aren't harvested and made into a mountain. So now the Gemara begins. The Gemara challenges the concept of what the word dagon means. We had said that it means midgin, anything which is heaped. So the Gemara asks, if that's true, so then in the pasuk in Nedarim Daf, which has that Chizkiyahu HaMelech re-encouraged and he restored the practice of taking Trumas and Maasros. So the pasuk there says, "Ukafrotz hadavar," and when the concept spread out, Hirbu b'nei Yisrael, Klal Yisrael did a lot. Reishis, dagon, tirish, v'yitzar. They took from grain, from grape, from olive. So we have here the term dagon and the term tvuas hasada, and then this is larov. That implies that they did beyond the midgin, beyond the dagon, they did more. They added beyond what was required. So the Gemara says, if the word dagon refers only to the five grains, so I understand what they did more. The more that they did was beyond the dagon, they did pol hamitzri. If, however, you're saying like Rabbi Meir wants to say that the word dagon includes anything which is heaped, so what else did they do? That includes everything that's chayav and trumas and meiser. What else could they possibly have brought? So Gemara says, no, they added even fruits and vegetables. Even the third layer, they added that, and they took truma from that as well, even though it's not chayav in truma d'oraisa. All right, now the Gemara discusses the meaning of the word tuvua. So Gemara says, Rav Yechonah says everybody agrees that tuvua refers to only the five minei dagon. Gemara says that our Mishnah shows that as well, because it says that Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim agree that if somebody makes a neder on tuvua, the only thing that's usher to him is the five types of grain. Now, Rabbi Yosef had a kasha from the same pasuk, is that over here it says, over here it says that they brought extra, and they brought tevuas hasadeh. That implies that the tevuas hasadeh is more than just the five types of grain, because it's saying they did extra and they brought tevuas hasadeh. That means that tevuas hasadeh is more. So Gemara answers, you're right. Tevuas hasadeh and tevua are not the same. The term tevua is only the five types of grain. Here it talks about tevuas hasadeh. That refers to more things, and therefore that includes extra. All right, now the Gemara brings an incident that happened, which is going to take us into Agadata. So the Gemara says that the son of Mar Shmuel left an inheritance, and in his inheritance he wrote that they should give 13,000 zuz to Rava. and they should take it from alalta. So Gemara wants to know, what does the term alalta mean? By translation, alalta means things which improve, things which increase in value. So generally that refers to plants, it refers to grain, it refers to produce, things which grow. So the question is, what is included in alalta? So Rava came before, so Rava sent a message to Rav Yosef. Actually, he said alalta da nahar panya. That is alalta, which is on the banks of the Panya River. So Rav sent a message to Rav Yosef asking what is included in alalta. So Rav Yosef said, if you look at our Mishnah, the Mishnah is clear. Tavua, which is a general term, refers only to the 5 types of grain. So alalta also refers only to the 5 types of grain. So Abai asked, how could you compare the two? Tavua only refers to the 5 types of grain, but the word alalta means anything which increases in value. So therefore, there's no proof. So they returned this whole response to Rava, and Rava said, my question was not whether or not alalta includes all their types of produce. I know that alalta definitely includes other produce. It wasn't the question. The question was if it includes rent of houses and ships. Why should it or should it not? So alalta means something which increases in value, but a house and a ship, when you rent it out, gets used and there's wear and tear and it decreases in value. However, it's not visible. You can't measure the value that's increased or decreased. It's just bit by bit. So my question is, do you call it alalta because you still get money from it? You collect rent, or is it not called alalta because it actually, the thing itself decreases in value as opposed to grain, which increases in value as it grows? So that was the question that he asked, and the Chachamim took this back to Rav Yosef to see what he would say about that. And Rav Yosef at this point took a little bit of offense, and he said, if he's such Talmud Chacham and he knows all these things, why does he keep sending questions to us? So Rav Yosef was upset, and Rava heard that, and Rava did not want to have Rav Yosef be upset, so he wanted to apologize. So he came to Rav Yosef's house on Erev Yom Kippur, and he found that Rav Yosef's attendant was pouring a cup for him, a cup of wine. So he said, I'm going to pour for him. So Rava poured the wine for him, and he served it to Rav Yosef. Now, Rav Yosef was blind, so he couldn't see who or what was happening, but he tasted the wine, and he said, this is like Rava's pouring. Rava, the son of Rav Yosef bar Chama, who was Rava. Now, the Mefarshim explained Rava had been a Talmud of Rav Yosef, and when he learned by him, he used to pour the wine for him. So Rava spoke up, and he said, yes, I am he. So he said to him, don't sit until you tell me pshat in the following pasuk. And the Mefarshim were explaining that he was trying to teach him a lesson. He was trying to teach him to be more humble. What was the pasuk he asked? It says, mi midbar matana, mi matana nachliel, mi nachliel bamois. So what does that mean? So he explained al Pidrush that if somebody makes himself like a midbar, makes himself hefker, makes himself without any heirs, then all of Torah is given to him as a matana. So if someone is midbar, he gets matana. Once he gets matana, he moves on to nachliel. That is, he becomes nachloi kel. That is, he gets the inheritance of Hashem. That's mi matana nachliel. And once he has nachlas kel, then he becomes gidua. He gets greatness, like it says vamos. Now, if however he becomes too great, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu lowers him, as it says, Mibamosekai, from the high, he goes down to the low valleys. Not only that, but he actually gets sunk deep in the ground, as it says, V'nishkafa al pnei ha'yishimain, and he will see throughout the plains. However, if he does tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will lift him up again, like it says afterwards, Kol Hagai Yinosei. Kol Gay Yinosei. Anyone who is low and humble will be uplifted. The Gemara now brings a brisa that goes back to the halachos of what's included in various terms, and this teaches us a number of halachos. So the brisa says somebody makes a neder that he's not going to have tzogon, so that includes the dried Egyptian bean, but not the fresh Egyptian bean. This is obviously the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, rice, so that's orez, or different types of chopped wheat kernels, whether it's split into 2 pieces each, or 3 or 4, all of those are not included in the neder because their form is changed from the original wheat. Now, if somebody makes a neder against Peiros Hashana, the fruit of this year, so then he's also to all the fruits of the year, and that is anything which can be considered a fruit, not to include things which don't grow from the ground, such as goats, sheep, milk, eggs, birds. Those are all not fruits, and therefore those are permitted. If he says those things which grew this year, then that answers those things as well, because they grew. They didn't grow from the ground, but they did grow. Now, somebody makes an Isser on a Peiros Arts, fruits of the ground. So that includes all fruits that grow from the ground. It does not include mushrooms. Mushrooms aren't considered to have grown from the ground, and at least they're not fruits of the ground. Says the Brisa, though, if he says Giduli Karka, things which grow from the ground, that includes mushrooms. So the Gemara asks, but mushrooms are shahakal. The halacha is that somebody who wants to make a bracha, so anything which grows from the ground is not going to be a shahakal. It's either adam or ha'etz. Something which doesn't grow from the ground is a shahakal. We have a brisa that says that salt water, and mushrooms are all shahakal. So you see, it's not considered to be growing from the ground. So Gemara answers, it's split. Abaye explains, they multiply from the ground, but they don't grow from the ground. They don't gain mass from the ground. They get their nutrition from the air, but they do multiply and become more, as in more quantity, from the ground. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? The Brisa said that mushrooms are shahakal because they are included in things which don't grow from the ground. They are telling me they do grow from the ground, they just don't get their nutrition from the ground. So you have to change the term. Instead of saying grow from the ground, it should be things which don't get nutrition from the ground. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses someone who makes a neder against types of cloth and clothing. So the Mishnah says somebody who makes a neder says he's not going to have enough from clothing, so he's allowed to use sackcloth, he's allowed to use curtains, and he's allowed to use chamila, which we're trying to explain are a type of curtain. All these things are not clothing. They're cloth, but they're not clothing, and therefore the Isser on clothing does not apply to these. Now, if he asks for his wool, that wool won't go on me, so that only refers to wool cloth. However, lumps of uncombed, unspun wool, that is permitted, he's allowed to cover himself with that. Same way with flax. If he asks flax on him, he's allowed to use unspun, unwoven clumps of flax. Now, Rav Yehuda says it really goes by the case. You can't just give a general rule. You have to look at what was happening, what was he trying to make an Isser against, and based on that, you figure out what he was referring to. So there could be a situation in which he was assering the unspun wool or flax. How's that? Let's say he was schlepping big weights, big sacks full of unspun wool and flax, and he smelled, and he was upset, and therefore he sweated. The Mishnah says he sweated and then he started smelling. So he said, I make a neder that I'm assering from wool and flax going on me. So usually going on me means I'm going to wear. I'm not going to wear them. But here he's saying it's not going to go on me. He obviously means he's not going to carry them because that's what was bothering him. But he is allowed to wear the cloth. It's just that carrying here, this was the issue that was causing him pain. So you can tell from context that's what the neder meant. The Gemara now begins with a brisa that adds some additional examples. The brisa says somebody makes a neder asering clothing. He's allowed to wear sacking and curtains and chamila, like we said in the Mishnah. And now we have a list of things that are aser. So on the list are a few things which we can identify. So there is punda, which is a belt. There is paskaya, which is a strap. Skortaya, the Gemara explains, the Gemara says that's a leather shirt. Katvalia is a heavier cloak, also of leather, that goes over the skortaya. Anpalya is a type of shoe or sandal. Plinya is an apron, which is also made of leather. And then there is a pair of pants made of leather and a hat. So these are all things which are forbidden. They're all clothing, and they're included in the Isser clothing, even though they're made out of leather. And more quotes a brisa that says that you're allowed to wear these things on Shabbos. Shabbos, you're only allowed to go out in the street wearing things which are natural things to wear. You can't put something over you and claim that it's clothing if it's not clothing. So the halacha there is you're allowed to wear thick sacking, counts as clothing. You're allowed to wear sigus, another type of sacking. It's even thicker than urea, even thicker than curtaining, which we spoke about. And you're allowed to wear urea, and you're allowed to wear chamila. And you're allowed to wear all these things because of rain, because they all count as clothing, at least according to this brisa. However, you cannot put a box or a barrel or a curtain over his head in order to protect him from the rain, because that's not clothing. Shepherds are allowed to have sacking, because shepherds wear sacking. And the brisa continues and says not only shepherds, sacking actually everybody's allowed to have, it's just the shepherds, the ones who usually wear sacking, and therefore that's why the Chachamim mention shepherds. Alright, now the Gemara briefly discusses our Mishnah. The Mishnah had quoted Rabbi Yehuda, who said it depends on the scenario. Slamar quotes a brisa that explains it more. And here Rabbi Yehuda, in this brisa, gives an example both ways. So he says if he was wearing wool clothing and it was too small on him and it caused him pain, and he said, I'm not going to have any wool go on me, then obviously he meant wool clothing. And it's forbidden to wear wool clothing, but he's allowed to carry it. If, however, he was carrying wool or carrying flax, and he sweated, and that made him uncomfortable, and he said, I'm asering flax on myself, then he's allowed to wear them, but he's not allowed to carry it because the Isser was on whatever was causing him pain.